Hello and welcome to another episode of 1000 Actually Fun Books, where we are looking for the best of fun escapist books. Today we're reviewing the book The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. This is a fantasy book and relatively new for being out. And so it is clearly it's going to be the first in a series, although I think it's the only one out right now. I thought it was a standalone, and it could be a standalone, but the ending really makes me think that there is going to be a sequel. Okay, so let's start with the plot. The plot kind of revolves around a city of mythical beings, kind of related to, we would call them genies, but a jinn. And they're kind of elemental, controlling creatures that are, in different groups. Anyway, they've got a city, and there's a lot of political intrigue going on between the various groups, including historical uprisings and stuff, and between the jinn and the half-breed with humans, and lots of political shuffling in a fantasy world. So our main character, there's actually a couple main characters. Our first main character, Nari, is a woman who is a thief, and she knows that she has magical abilities, minor things like being able to heal herself and others, being able to understand most languages, things like that. And she's just, kind of really poor, making her way in the world by conning other people. And she does something magical that basically summons one of the jinn. And the jinn takes a look at her and goes, "Oh, you're one of those. I thought there were none of you left. You used to be like the ruling class and then got wiped out. And now there's none of you left. And I need to take you back to the Jinn city and present you as one of these people." And she's like, "What? No, I'm fine here." And then he kind of we'll say sort of kidnaps her. Not really, because they're running from somebody trying to kill her, and she kind of goes with him willingly at some points in this. In any case, they get to the city, and then it's political intrigue. And another main character is one of the jinn from the cities, who is part of the current ruling class. So Nari is part of the former ruling class that's mostly extinct, and he's from the current ruling class, a full-blood jinn. And he is young and kind of grown up in the court, or the privileged class, we'll say, and is being exposed to how much corruption is going on, and he's not liking it, and he's trying to make the world a better place. We'll just put it that way. So that's kind of the story in a nutshell, a fantasy world with lots of political intrigue. Okay, so things I like. First would be the exotic locations and world building. So this does have a very exotic feel in the best sense. This is Middle Eastern, Cairo and Persia, and maybe a little bit of Afghanistan, and just kind of a culture that's very foreign to Western world, and a culture very different. Women sometimes are veiled, and that's just the way it is. And there's a little bit of hints of Islam, or some maybe twisted form of it in some way going on in the religious system. It's definitely not Islam, but maybe alluding to things in Islam that I'm not familiar with. And that makes for, like I said, a very exotic feel. The magical creatures tend to be, again, a Middle Eastern origin for what these are and what their powers are and what they do and what they're like. So that is a very interesting world building. It makes for a really beautiful imagery in some of these cases for what the city is like, and the palaces, and the way the buildings behave, because some of them seem like they have some personality, something about what these powerful demigods in the past were like. That, again, it just has a very foreign feel, and it's very fun in that respect. So I liked the world building. It has an epic feel to it, like one of those kind of stories where you have multi-generations of history that weigh down the present. You really feel that in this. That's really affecting our characters today. And that you feel that their efforts are like tiny shoves against a huge wall for if they want to change anything. The weight of the culture and the system kind of bearing down on the efforts of our main characters and whatever it is they're trying to do. So it has that epic, large-scale feel. It doesn't feel like a tiny little, a tiny little problem with tiny little solutions. One of our main characters, Ali, he's the prince, the ruling class main character. So I did like him. He's naive, but he seemed to have a good heart. Like, he wants justice. The current system is fairly caste-based. Here are your elites, and they get all the privileges, and then there are these down at the bottom, and they get none, and that's the way it should be as far as the system is concerned, as far as the king is concerned. And the prince is kind of like, can't we have some balanced justice? And they're like, no, I can't believe you tried to punish that, elite person over there. That person should never have gotten punished. And Ali's like, what? But he stole something. He should be punished. And they're like, no, because he's an elite. That kind of thing. So I like him as a character who's just basically like, the system is unfair, and if it's unfair, we should change it. We should try and make some justice. Make sure that the lower class don't rebel because they're so unhappy with the way the system is stratified. So let's try and make it a little bit fairer. And that seems to be his goal. He is naive, not always seeing the backstabbing or the maneuvering going on in the background, trying to get him to do certain things or not do things or whatever. And I kind of liked that naivety. He kind of has some of that stripped away over the course of the story, being like, oh my goodness, this person betrayed me, or this person, I think should have had this outcome and this one happened instead because of corruption or injustice or just the way it works. And I like that as a character. I kind of felt like there was character growth with this character. So those are the things I liked. I liked one of our main characters, and I liked the world building. Now, things I didn't like. I didn't actually like our other main character, the thief. Now, I do tend to like a Robin Hood-esque character, but not... she is a thief, a con man, but it doesn't feel Robin Hood-esque. It's not somebody who's doing it for the betterment of anything except herself. She's a very self-centered character pretty much throughout the entire story. You don't really feel that, at least I didn't, until the very, very end where there's maybe a smidgen, possibly, of maybe seeing beyond herself. But most of the time, she's all out for herself and makes choices based on that. And I didn't like being around her because she was so selfish. She's an interesting character because of her abilities and her unique position in this society and what that means for how people maneuver around her, but I didn't like her as a person. And that could make it hard for me to read her sections because I'm just like, you are so selfish. It's not overwhelming. She's not quite a, self-entitled brat, but she still, can have the opportunity to do something for the betterment of all mankind, so to speak, and she would choose what is best for her or the people that she cares about more so than everybody else. She's just okay. I didn't find her relatable. How's that? So, yeah. Another thing is this book is all about the interpersonal conflict. So there is action in this. There are sword fights and chases and a couple epic battle type of situations. But for the most part, that's not what the story is about. It's all about the politics, the drama, the interpersonal conflict, the backstabbing, the backroom deals, all of that, lying, deception, deceit. And I don't love a story like that. This one is just a personal preference. That's just not my kind of style. The author does a good job with it, though. I will say that I think that the author made the characters believable in that if you set up a character with a certain personality and they reacted according to that personality, not necessarily very deep in their character development or their, well-roundedness or anything like that. They're kind of shallow characters, but they did react well, and they're written well on how they react and how they talk with each other and what they're trying to do to hide their activities or whatever it may be, or to get what they want or whatever. So there's that manipulation. There's too many people, I felt, you get close to somebody because there's something you want or what you want them to do or whatever it may be, and I just don't find that fun. Again, that's that I'm not relating to these characters. I just wouldn't behave this way, so I didn't enjoy reading them. But that's just personal preference. Another dislike would be the romance. So this is not a romance book. This is we'll say a romantic tragedy. The characters that kind of, you get the impression, want to be together, do not, for any couple in this book. One person was kind of like, will you marry me? And the other person is like, no. It would be nice, but no. And another person, clearly wants to marry another character, but is never going to have the opportunity to ask. Instead, has to marry somebody else, and that's what it looks like it's going to happen. And, there's just, so romance is dead in this book. There's no romance. That's, again, it's a little bit more that interpersonal conflict is the main character, or the main thread in this. Lots of tension in that respect, but it's not a pleasant outcome. And that gets me to my next point that I didn't like, which was the ending. So this is a book with, I wouldn't quite say a tragic ending, but a unhappy ending, a broken family ending, people who were close at the beginning end up distrusting each other and turning their backs on each other and, not helping each other or betraying each other or dying or whatever it may be. So there's a bunch of unhappy ending. Like, no character in the end is happy. And that's kind of not my thing. I like happy endings. I like a happy book. And this was just not a happy book. Another thing that I didn't like about this is, I'll call it, what is truth? Now this comes, again, kind of tying into that deception idea of, somebody will tell a story about, like, the history of their people. And you're like, oh, that's the history. And then another character comes around and says, well, that's not the way it worked. This is the way it actually was, and gets a completely different slant on this. And then another person comes in later and says, no, this is actually what actually happened. And by the end, you're like, what actually happened? I don't know, because everybody has a different take on this. Who were the good guys? Who were the bad guys? What were they even fighting about? I don't even know. So there was a lot of what is truth going on, because by the end of the book, you may have a whole bunch of different sides of something, but because so many different people are telling the story, you kind of end up going, well, any one of them could be lying or misrepresenting, and we don't really know. So I didn't love that for getting a handle on the history of the world. My final thing on this is there is a lot of weird words in this. They do have a glossary. The back of the book has a glossary in it for all your weird words. But I started getting confused on it because, for example, our jinn, our genie characters, our elementals, they are broken up into factions, each with their own foreign, made-up word name for what they are. And then sometimes they're called jinn, and sometimes they're called something else, and sometimes that something else means one faction, and sometimes it means all of the jinn or all of the city, or, just after a while I started going, I'm not following which one is which and why, and what does this name mean, and, a bunch of other words, again, that are thrown in there, once, and then you're supposed to remember it throughout the whole book as to what this word meant. And so I ended up not liking all the made-up words. It was a little too overwhelming. Some made-up words can be fantastic, but this was too much. Okay, so I have a hard time rating this book because I didn't enjoy it, but I do think it was well written. And I think somebody who likes that political drama, the emotional tug of war and the tragic ending or unhappy ending that really feels that's powerful and stuff would really like this book. And I think it was well done enough that I am going to give it a recommendation. I'm going to give it a thumbs up, despite the fact that it just wasn't for me. because I do think it had that escapist feel. I do think that somebody who likes this style of book would really enjoy it. I had a bunch of things I didn't like about it, but most of the things were really my preference, not a problem with the book itself. Like, I like a happy ending, and this didn't have a happy ending. But somebody who likes books without a happy ending would probably be like, well, that's not a detriment for me. I like this book. So I am going to recommend it, even though for me it was just not for me, and I probably will never read the sequel, if it ever comes out with a sequel, or anything else by this author. I think this was a first-time author. But I will recommend it first because I think it was well done and interestingly written and creative, a unique feel to it, and I really like the world building. So yeah, so that's my take on this book. So for part 2, I'm gonna say what I'm gonna do next is gonna be called The Second Son by Simon Gervais and Ryan Steck. So this is the first of a series called The Second Son, and it's an action thriller about some sort of it kind of reminds me, the blurb reminds me of a 90s action movie. So somebody's brother goes down in a helicopter accident and somebody starts gunning for him, and he gets into lots of gun battles and chases and trying to figure out what's going on and what happened to his brother and who's trying to kill him and why. And I think there might be a little bit of espionage going on too. So that looks like a fun, just fluffy action story. So we're going to try that one next. So thank you for watching, and I hope you will join me next week.